Hey, it's me. So I was reading something interesting I wanted to share with y'all. You're going to notice a bunch of my videos are down, and yes, there's a reason, but I'm not getting to it. So there is a Hebrew phrase that is spoken this way, Yamach Shemo, however. It's may his name be obliterated. And it was a curse placed after the name of particular enemies of the Jewish people. And there's another way of saying it, Yamach Shamo ve Zichro. Obliterate his name and his memory. Okay, so there were times in the Bible, apparently, Torah, the Old Testament, where people were cursed and their names were considered obliterated out from God's sight. I'm just going to leave that there. All right, I want to talk to you about boundaries today. Boundaries. Important thing. Boundaries, they are. I'm going to start reading from this book, and if people come in, they come in. This specifically is about boundaries and your friends. This is coming from boundaries, when to say yes, when to say no, to take control of your life. It is by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend, and the copyright is 1992. I like these books from the 1990s. That's what I have books mostly from, I think. All right, so this is chapter 8 of the Boundaries book. Boundaries and your friends. Marcia switched on the television, not even noticing which show was on. She was thinking about her phone call with her best friend, Tammy. She had asked Tammy to go to a movie with her. Tammy had had other plans for the evening. Once again, Marcia had taken the initiative. Once again, she was disappointed. Tammy never called her. Was this what friendship was supposed to be about? Friendship. The word conjures up images of intimacy, fondness, and a mutual drawing together of two people. Friends are symbols of how meaningful our lives have been. The saddest people on earth are those who end their days with no relationships in which they're truly known and truly loved. Friendship can be a broad category. Most of the relationships mentioned in this book have friendship components. But for our purposes, let's define friendship as a non-romantic relationship that is attachment-based rather than function-based. In other words, let's exclude relationships based on a common task, like work or ministry. Let's look at friendship as comprising people we want to be around just for their own sake. Boundary conflicts with friends come in all sizes and shapes. To understand the various issues, let's look at a few conflicts and how they can be resolved with boundaries. We're going to look at, I think it's 4 conflicts here, and how to resolve them with boundaries. I don't know what's going on with my computer here, sorry. All right. The compliant conflict number 1. In some ways, it was a great friendship. In other ways, it was awful. Sean and Tim enjoyed the same sports, activities, and recreation. They went to the same church and liked the same restaurants. But they were just too nice to each other. They both had difficulty saying no to each other. Their realization of the problem came up one weekend when a whitewater rafting trip and a 60s concert were scheduled on the same day. Sean and Tim enjoyed both activities, but they couldn't do both. Sean called Tim, suggesting they go rafting. Absolutely, answered his friend. However, unbeknownst to each other, neither Sean nor Tim really wanted to go rafting. In their heart of hearts, both men had been looking forward to going to the concert. Halfway down the river, Sean and Tim got honest with each other. Tired and wet, Tim blurted out, "It was your big idea to come on this trip." "Tim," Sean said with surprise, "I thought you wanted to go rafting." "Oh, no. Since you called me, I figured that's what you wanted, old buddy," he continued ruefully. "Maybe it's time we stopped treating each other like China dolls." The result of two compliants interacting is that neither does what he really wants. Each is so afraid of telling the other the truth that neither ever does. Let's apply a boundary checklist to this conflict. This checklist of questions will not only help you locate where you are in setting boundaries, but also show you how to get where you want to go. Number one, what are the symptoms? One symptom of a compliant conflict is dissatisfaction, a sense that you allowed something you shouldn't have. Two, what are the roots? Compliance come from backgrounds where they had to avoid saying no in order to keep others happy. Since their roots are similar, it's often hard for two compliant people to help each other. Three, what is the boundary conflict? Compliant people politely deny their own boundaries to keep the peace. Four, who needs to take ownership? Each compliant needs to take responsibility for his or her attempts to appease or please the other. Sean and Tim both need to admit that they each control the other by being nice. Number five, what do they need? Compliant people need to have supportive relationships to plug into, be they support groups, home Bible studies, or counselors. Their fear of hurting the other person makes it difficult for them to set boundaries on their own. Number six, how do they begin? Both compliants practice setting limits on trivial things. They may begin with being honest about things like tastes in restaurants, church liturgies, music, and the like. Number seven, how do they set boundaries with each other? Sean and Tim talk with each other face to face, finally telling the truth and revealing limits they'd like to start setting. They commit themselves to better boundaries with each other. Number eight, what happens next? Sean and Tim may have to admit that their interests are not as similar as they thought. They may need to separate more from each other. Having different friends for different activities is no blot on the relationship. It might help their friendship in the long run. All right, so that's compliant. That means both people they don't really have much of a ability to decide for themselves. They're just trying to make the other person happy. And that doesn't work in friendships. It's really hard to have a friendship with somebody who just goes along with what you want while they're resenting you. Number two, conflict number two. Hi, Silver Storm 3. Thank you for the hearts. Compliant aggressive controller. The compliant aggressive controller conflict, the most identifiable of friendship conflicts, has classic symptoms. The compliant feels intimidated and inferior in the relationship. The aggressive controller feels irritated at being nagged by the compliant. Well, all right, if you insist, is the catchphrase of the compliant. Usually the aggressive controller is insisting on using some of the compliant's time, talents, or treasures. The aggressive controller has no problem demanding what she wants. Sometimes she just takes what she wants without asking. I needed it is enough reason for the aggressive controller to help herself to whatever the compliant has, be it car keys, a cup of sugar, or 3 hours of time. Since the compliant is usually unhappy in this relationship, he is the one who needs to take action. Let's put this relationship through the boundary checklist. Number one, what are the symptoms of this compliant aggressive controller? The compliant feels controlled and resentful. The aggressive controller feels good, except she doesn't like to be nagged. Oh, okay, Silver Storm 3. What are the roots is number two. You can type in your question, I'll get to it. The compliant probably grew up in a family who taught him to avoid conflict rather than embrace it. The aggressive controller never received training in delaying gratification and in taking responsibility for herself. Or we can talk about it when I'm done. I'll have a Q&A time afterwards. Number three, what is the boundary conflict? Two specific boundary conflicts are the inability of the compliant to set clear limits with his friend and the inability of the aggressive controller to respect the compliant's limits. Number four, who needs to take ownership? The compliant needs to see that he isn't a victim of the aggressive controller. He is volunteering his power to his friend on a silver platter. Giving up his power is his way of controlling his friend. The compliant controls the aggressive controller by pleasing her, hoping it will appease her and cause her to change her behavior. The aggressive controller needs to own that she has difficulty listening to no and accepting the limits of others. She needs to take responsibility for her need to control her friend. Number 5, what is needed? The unhappier one in the friendship, the compliant, needs to plug into a supportive group of people to help him with his boundary conflict. Oh, I don't know, Melody, where I got the lamb. I have no idea. The sheep? It's a sheep, actually. Number 6, how do they begin? In preparation for confronting his friend, the compliant needs to practice setting limits in his support group. The aggressive controller could really benefit from honest feedback from loving friends on how she runs over people and how she can learn to respect the limits of others. By the way, this does not work with narcissists at all. Number 7, how do they set boundaries? The compliant applies biblical principles to his friendship. See Matthew 18. He confronts his friend on her control and intimidation. He tells her that the next time she tries to control him, he will leave. He does not attempt to control her. Confrontation isn't an ultimatum meant to rob her of her choices. He sets limits to let her know that her control hurts him and ends their friendship. Such limits protect the compliant from further hurt. The aggressive controller can become as angry or intimidating as she wants, but the compliant won't be around to get hurt. He will be out of the room, the house, or the friendship until it's safe to come back. The aggressive controller experiences the consequences of her actions. Not having her friend around may force her to miss the attachment, and she can begin to take responsibility for the control that ran her friend off. Again, does not work with narcissists because they're in it for the control, and they're going to stay in it for the control. No problem, Melody. Okay, now what? Number 8. At this point, if both friends are open, there's your key. Both friends are open. Hey, making lemonade. Did you learn that song so we can do it yet? I was waiting to hear from you or see you. I told Safe Robbie to go fetch you up so we could do our song. So at this point, if both friends are open, the two can renegotiate their relationship. They can set new ground rules such as, I'll stop nagging if you'll stop being critical, and can build a new friendship. All right, that's all we can ask, right? Just work on it. Take your time, girl. I'm just saying, I was just wondering if you remembered. I'm reading your question there, Silverstone. Conflict number 3, compliant manipulative controller. Kathy, I'm in a real jam, and you're the only one I can depend on to help me out. I can't get a babysitter for the kids, and I have this church meeting. Kathy listened to the plight of her friend, Sharon. It was the usual story. Sharon neglected to plan for events, to call ahead for sitters. She often called Kathy to help out in these self-induced emergencies. Kathy hated being stuck in this position. Sharon didn't do it on purpose, and she needed her for a good cause. Kathy still felt used and exploited. What was she to do? Many friendships get stuck in this interaction between compliance and manipulative controllers. Why do we call Sharon controlling? She's not consciously trying to manipulate her friend. However, no matter what her good intentions are, when she's in a jam, Sharon uses her friends. She takes them for granted, thinking that they shouldn't mind doing the friend a favor. Her friends go along saying, well, that's just Sharon. They stifle their resentment. Let's run this conflict through our boundary checklist. Number 1, what are the symptoms? The compliant, Kathy, feels resentment at the manipulative controller's, Sharon's, last-minute requests. Kathy feels as though her friendship is being taken for granted. She begins to avoid her friend. Number 2, what are the roots? Sharon's parents rescued her from every jam, from finishing term papers at 3 a.m. to lending her money when she was well into her 30s. She lived in a very forgiving universe where nice people would always help her out. She never had to face her own irresponsibility and lack of discipline and planning. As a child, Kathy didn't like her mother's hurt look when she said no. She grew up afraid of hurting others by setting boundaries. Kathy would do anything to avoid conflict with friends, especially with Sharon. Number 3, what is the boundary conflict? Sharon doesn't plan ahead and take responsibility for her schedule. When responsibilities get away from her, she calls out to the nearest compliant for help, and Kathy comes running. Number 4, who needs to take ownership? Kathy, the motivated party in this conflict, sees how her never-ending yes contributes to Sharon's illusion that she doesn't ever have to plan ahead. Kathy needs to stop feeling like a victim and take responsibility for saying no. Number 5, what does she need? Kathy needs to connect with others who will support her as she looks at the boundary issues between her and her friend. Number 6, how does she begin? Kathy practices saying no with supportive friends. In a supportive atmosphere, she learns to disagree, to state her opinion, and to confront. They all pray for strength and guidance in this relationship. Number 7, how does she set boundaries? At their next lunch, Kathy tells Sharon about her feelings of being used and taken advantage of. She explains how she'd like a more mutual relationship. Then she lets her friend know that she won't be taking any more emergency babysitting jobs. Sharon, unaware of how she was hurting her friend, is genuinely sorry about the problem. She begins to take more responsibility for her schedule. After a few futile attempts to get Kathy to babysit at the last minute and having to miss a few important meetings, she starts planning for events a week or two ahead of time. Again, in a perfect world, not with a narcissist. Number 8, what happens next? The friendship grows and deepens. Over time, Kathy and Sharon laugh over the conflict that actually brought them closer. Now, this is a story made up for the book Boundaries. I don't know if it's true people. I didn't write the story. Yeah, it's just a book, the Boundaries book. Just bits and parts of different books is what I'm going to be doing from now on. I'm not going to sit and try to read a whole book. I'm just going to take whatever part resonates with me and share it. That way we stay on a topic and we don't get off on tangents. Okay, conflict number 4. Compliant, non-responsive. Remember the Marcia-Tammy friendship at the beginning of this chapter? One friend doing all the work and the other coasting illustrates the compliant, non-responsive conflict. One party feels frustrated and resentful. The other wonders what the problem is. Marcia sensed that the friendship wasn't as important to Tammy as it was to her. Let's analyze the situation. Number 1, what are the symptoms? Marcia feels depressed, resentful, and unimportant. Tammy, however, may feel guilty or overwhelmed by her friend's needs and demands. Number 2, what are the roots? Marcia always feared that if she didn't control her important attachments by doing all the work, she'd be abandoned. So she became a Martha to everyone else's Mary, a worker instead of a lover. That's from Luke 10:38-42 if you have a Bible. Tammy has never had to work hard for friendships. Always popular and in demand, she's passively taken from important friendships. Hey, G. She's never lost anyone by not being responsive. In fact, they work harder to keep her around. 3, what is the boundary conflict? There could be 2 boundary conflicts here. First, Marcia takes on too much responsibility for the friendship. She's not letting her friend bear her own load. Second, Tammy doesn't take enough responsibility for the friendship. She knows that Marcia will come up with activities from which she can pick and choose. Why work when someone else will? Number 4, who needs to take ownership? Marcia needs to take responsibility for making it too easy for Tammy to do nothing. She sees that her attempts to plan, call, and do all the work are disguised attempts to control love. Number 5, what do they need? Both women need support from other friends. They can't look objectively at this problem without a relationship or 2 of unconditional love around them. Number 6, how do they begin? Marcia practices setting limits with supportive friends. She realizes that she will still have friendships in which each friend carries her own weight if she and Tammy break off their friendships. Number 7, how do they set boundaries? Marcia tells Tammy about her feelings and informs her that she will need to take equal responsibility for their friendship in the future. In other words, after Marcia calls, she won't call again unless Tammy does. Marcia hopes that Tammy will miss her and begin calling. If worse comes to worse, and the friendship atrophies due to Tammy's unresponsiveness, Marcia has gained something. She's learned it wasn't a mutual connection in the first place. Now she can grieve, get over it, and move on to find real friends. Number 8, what happens next? The mini crisis changes the character of the friendship permanently. If it either exposes it for a non-relationship or it provides soil for the rebuilding of a better one. I like that. And then there's some questions here, but I wanted to get to the question of the actual person in the room, if she didn't leave yet. Silver Storms. I was reading your question. You're a partner of someone who has BPD. He triggered and changed into someone you don't know. after his father died 6 years ago, and you've been together 17 years, been supportive and looking back, helping him get through so much. You know it's used loosely, but you're an empath and have had boundaries and know who you are, okay? What else? Was there more to your question? What is your question, actually, Silverstorm? Okay. He became abusive after his death, started verbally first and then physically. You're dependent on him. He said that you didn't have to work because he was helping you against, you were helping him against his narcissistic brother in probate. I'm kind of confused. So what is your question, Silverstorms? I'm not good at reading between lines. You're just going to have to spell out your question. I don't even need all the backstory. Just ask me the question that you want to know the answer to. My brain doesn't work like intricately like all that stuff. Why is he mirroring his brother? Let's see. I'm not sure how he's mirroring his brother. Am I missing something? Explain what you mean, mirroring his brother. In what way is he mirroring his brother? Is his brother verbally and physically abusive? Did his brother create dependency in his wife or whoever? His brother was abusive to him growing up. Well, hurt people hurt people. Simple as that. People that have been hurt and traumatized often will traumatize other people. That's all. Question is, I'm waiting for the question. And if anybody else wants to answer the question, feel free to chime in. Blacking out and dissociating. Okay, you black out and dissociate? Is that what you're saying? My husband might be better off answering that question. When he rages, he blacks out and dissociates? Man, these yawns, I swear. Keep typing. I'm going to continue reading, but I'll keep reading your questions. So, boundary conflicts and friendships are difficult to deal with because the only cord tying the relationship together is the attachment itself. There's no wedding ring, there's no job connection, there's just the friendship, and it often seems all too fragile and in danger of being severed. Okay, I'm not sure who you're talking about dissociating and stuff. So, okay. Oh, he dissociates and then he doesn't remember and runs away. Well, it sounds like he needs some help. Now, if you can get him help is the question. Most friendships have no external commitment, such as marriage, work, or church, to keep the friends together. The phone could just stop ringing and the relationship die with no real ripples in the lives of the participants. So aren't friendships at greater risk of breaking up when boundary conflicts arise? This type of thinking has two problems. First, it assumes that external institutions such as marriage, work, and church are the glue that holds relationships together. It assumes that our commitments are what hold us together, not our attachments. Biblically and practically, nothing could be further from the truth. Hang on. I would not stick with somebody like that personally. I would find some way out of your dependency on him. Sounds like he's got PTSD or something in a real severe way. He's got the PTSD traits. Yeah, I wouldn't stay with somebody like that personally, but that's your choice. We hear this thinking in many Christian circles. If you don't like someone, act like you do. Or make yourself love them, or commit to loving someone, or choose to love someone, and the feelings will come. Sometimes we call it fake it till you make it. Choice and commitment are the elements of a good friendship. We do need more than fair weather friends. However, Scripture teaches us that we can't depend on commitment or sheer willpower, for they'll always let us down. Paul cried out that he did what he didn't want to do, and he didn't do what he wanted to do. Romans 7:19. He was stuck. We all experience the same conflict. Even when we commit to a loving friendship, bad things happen. We let them down, feelings go sour. Simply white-knuckling it won't reestablish the relationship. Some relationships should not be reestablished also. There you go, Melly. I agree with Melly. I think you need to get into a therapist. We can solve our dilemma the same way Paul solved his. Therefore, there's now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Romans 8:1. The answer is being in Christ Jesus. In other words, the relationship with Christ, both vertically and horizontally. As we stay connected to God, to our friends, and to our support groups, we're filled up with the grace to hang in there and fight out the boundary conflicts that arise. Without this external source of connection, we're doomed to an empty willpower that ultimately fails or makes us think we're omnipotent. So, in other words, not playing God. Hey, Rachel. Have I done a video on adrenal fatigue? No, I did not do a video on adrenal fatigue. I know about adrenal fatigue. And yes, it'll affect other people greatly, I'm sure, because you can't be your truest and fullest self if you have adrenal fatigue. And it raises your cortisol level, which means you gain weight, you feel sluggish, you feel lethargic, you feel unmotivated, and nobody's fun to be around when they're like that. So yeah, it does take a toll on the body and on the relationships. That I do know. All right. Again, the Bible teaches that all commitment is based on a loving relationship. Being loved leads to commitment and willful decision making, not the reverse. So yeah, if you don't feel loved, you're not going to commit to somebody. And you're going to end up walking on eggshells with them, and it's not a healthy thing, and it's not an enjoyable thing. How does this apply to friendships? Look at it this way. How would you feel if your best buddy approached you and said, I just wanted to tell you that the only reason we're friends is because I'm committed to our friendship. There's nothing that draws me to you. I don't particularly enjoy your company, but I'll keep choosing to be your friend. Wow. You probably wouldn't feel very safe or cherished in this relationship. You'd suspect you're being befriended out of obligation, not out of love. Don't let anyone fool you. All friendships need to be based on attachment, or they have a shaky foundation. Yeah, I agree with Wayne. The second problem with thinking that friendships are weaker than institutionalized relationships, such as marriage, church, and work, is in assuming that those three aren't attachment-based. It simply isn't true. If it were, wedding vows would ensure a 0% divorce rate. Professions of faith would ensure faithful church attendance. A hiring would ensure 100% attendance at work. These three important institutions, so crucial to our lives, are to a large degree attachment-based. It's scary to realize that the only thing holding our friends to us isn't our performance or our lovability or their guilt or their obligation. The only thing that'll keep them calling, spending time with us, and putting up with us is love. And that's the one thing we cannot control. At any moment, any person can walk away from a friendship. However, as we enter more and more into an attachment-based life, we learn to trust love. We learn that the bonds of a true friendship are not easily broken. And we learn that in a good relationship, good being the operative word here, we can set limits that will strengthen, not injure the connection. All right, so I'm reading this for a minute. Yeah, that's not a healthy relationship. I know you say you're dependent on him, but I think it's time to get out from under that dependency and get some help. Because being devalued, that's not good. Enmeshment is definitely not good. And especially enmeshment with somebody that has such an explosive temper. Yeah, you need to go see a therapist and check that out. Yeah, definite prayers for you, Silverstone. God, give Silverstorm the guidance to know exactly what counselor to go to. Give them peace that passes all understanding in this situation, and help them to understand that they don't deserve to be abused, and that they're really not doing the abuser any favors staying in the relationship and being scapegoated. In your name I pray, amen. Okay. So you're pretty sure your mother is diagnosed an undiagnosed borderline, as you have mild BPD traits. Ah, okay, Wayne. That's possible, yeah. Okay, so we're not going to get into the romantic relationship part, but I am going to get into how can I set limits with needy friends. Because a lot of people I know have friends that are just like leeches sometimes. I was talking to a woman one day in session who felt extremely isolated and out of control. Setting limits with her friends seemed impossible for her. They were in perpetual crisis. Aww. Martha, I'm sorry. God heal Martha's heart too and comfort her during this time. Oh, poor kitty. Poor Martha. My heart goes out to you, girl. Condolences on the loss of your kitty cat. That's so hard. Ugh. I asked her to describe the quality of her relationships. Oh, I've got lots of friends. I volunteer at the church 2 nights a week. I teach a Bible study once a week. I'm on a couple of church committees, and I sing in the choir. I'm getting exhausted just listening to you describe your week, I said. But what about the quality of these relationships? They're great. People are being helped, they're growing in their faith, and troubled marriages are getting healed. You know, I said, I'm asking you about friendships, and you're answering about ministries. They're not the same thing. She had never considered the difference. Her concept of friendship was to find people with needs and throw herself into a relationship with them. She didn't know how to ask for things for herself. And that was the source of her boundary conflicts. Without these ministry relationships, this woman would have nothing. So she couldn't say no. Saying no would have plummeted her into isolation, which would have been intolerable. But it happened anyway. She had come for help because of burnout. When the Bible tells us to comfort with the comfort with which we're comforted, 2 Corinthians 1:4, it's telling us something. We need to be comforted before we can comfort. That may mean setting boundaries on our ministry so that we can be nurtured by our friends. We must distinguish between the two. A prayerful look at your friendships will determine whether you need to begin building boundaries with some of your friends. By setting boundaries, you may save some important ones from declining. And when romantic dating relationships lead to marriage, you'll still need to remember how to build and maintain boundaries, even in this most intimate of human relationships. All right, so that was boundaries with friends. And it was also about the attachment types. Compliant non-responsive, compliant manipulative, compliant aggressive, and compliant compliant. So it gives you something to look at your own relationships through and decide what kind you're in and how to set those boundaries with people. You have to have boundaries. Anybody that tells you, oh, we don't need boundaries, we'll just let what happens, that's not a good plan. Trust me, it's not a good plan. I understand, G. Marie. Yeah, my heart goes out to both of you, Mommy Mars, and also to Silver. Is it Silver? Yeah. Silver Storm. That's really sad about losing your kitty cat. And I'm sad for you, Silver Storm, that you find yourself in an abusive situation with somebody that's very easily triggered and dissociates and goes into blind rages. But you are really in danger if you stay in that kind of situation. So I will hope that you will talk to a safe person and make your way away from this person so that they can get the help they need and not take things out on you, because you deserve better than that, basically. Oh, that's good, Wayne. You've broken free from all the guilt trips and manipulations and stuff. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm breaking free.
You're doing what?
I said I'm breaking free. I'm breaking free, learning to break free from that stuff. Okay, so any questions or comments, now would be the time. I know I had to end a relationship years ago, and I've talked about this before, with somebody that constantly made promises to me to go places with me, to go out to dinner and stuff. Yeah, it can apply to colleagues, of course. It can apply to everybody. And they never followed through. And I just got tired of the empty promises. I would get all dressed up and ready to go and excited. And then my mind starts imagining what it's going to be like and who we're going to see there. And, and then all of a sudden the time comes and it goes by and you're all dressed up, ready to go. And there's nothing. And then the person calls you a couple days later and you're like, what happened to our dinner date? Remember, you're going to take me out for Thai food or whatever, Chinese, Japanese, whatever food. And we're going to do the grill where the guy comes over right to the table and starts everything aflame, and have some really good food and stuff. What happened? Oh, girly, I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. Something came up. Now, the first couple times something comes up, you're like, okay, well, yeah, that happens, But if it's going on over years, months and years, you're kind of like, skip you, chica. I'm not gonna hang my hat on your, empty hopes and keep getting dressed and all ready to, go out and have a good time with you or whatever. And then they would say, well, I know I screwed up on the last couple times. So your birthday's coming up. I'm going to take you out and give you a really nice dinner. It's going to be really good, girl. We're going to do it up really big. I'm going to invite my cousin and some friends. We're going to do it up really big. Yeah, we did it up so big it didn't happen. It never happened. I never got my birthday dinner, ever. And I cut ties with her. I just totally cut her right out of my life because I was sick of constant disappointment. I couldn't deal with it anymore. I don't handle disappointment real well anyways, because I had a dad that left me crying on the doorstep when I was 3 years old, expecting to go to an amusement park with him that he had called me up and set me up for and got me all excited and stuff. Had Matt what? Had Matt what? I mean, did he ever do that to me? Set me up and then disappoint me? Yeah, he did when we were dating quite a bit, and I used to get really irritated about it. Oh, that's good, Wayne. Good for you. Aw, Julie, that's so nice. Don't be jealous. I just like to dance. It's fun. But I will check out your comment on my dance video, though. That's pretty cool. Thanks for leaving me a comment. Oh, had you as a friend. I don't know. Who knows what Matthew's issues are today, as far as that goes. I think another good chapter to read maybe is Boundaries and Yourself. Because you need to set boundaries for yourself, too. I don't know, G. Marie. You have to take that up with him because I don't know what he's talking about. And let's see what it says here. You're not friends with G. Marie anymore?
Oh my God.
Don't play around like that. If you're goofing around and teasing.
No, I meant have.
Have. Oh, you said a typo.
Like 3 different rooms.
He's in a bunch of different rooms. So he's not paying attention to what he's typing. Yeah, he corrected it. Okay. All right. It was supposed to say have. I got it. Okay. No problem. That's why I try to stay out of his little personal issues. Because I don't always know what's going on. Sorry you got hurt. Hurt your wrist and shoulder. Ouch. Oh, Martha lost her poor kitty. Oh. Yeah, well, God knows who I meant. God touch Martha's heart and bring her comfort. Sorry, the Mar part throws me every time. But yeah. There's even boundaries with God, which I find interesting. There's a chapter on that in here too. Boundaries with money, boundaries with eating. I've finally learned to respect the boundaries with eating. Oh, I was reading boundaries in friendships, but now I'm looking at boundaries with self. So like with money, impulse spending, careless budgeting, living beyond one's means, credit problems, chronically borrowing from friends or family, ineffectual savings plans, working more to pay all the bills, and enabling others. God intended for money to be a blessing to us and to others. Give and it will be given to you. Luke 6:38. The Bible that says that the problem at all is not money. It's the love of money that's the root of all kinds of evil. People say, oh, well, money is the root of all evil. No, the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money, love of it, the lust for it, the misuse of it, that kind of thing. And it says we should have, when we have difficulty saying no to spending more than we should, we run the risk of becoming someone else's servant. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. We need to make sure that our money, spending and saving and donating and all that stuff is in check and that it's in balance. Time. Business meetings, luncheon appointments, project deadlines, church and school activities, holiday meetings. All these things need to be kept in balance as well. People whose time is out of control inconvenience other people, whether they mean to or not. The problem often stems from one or more of the following causes. Omnipotence. These people have unrealistic, somewhat grandiose expectations of what they can accomplish in their given amount of time. No problem, I'll do it, is their motto. 2, over responsibility for the feelings of others. They think that leaving a party too early will cause the host to feel abandoned. See, I don't worry about that stuff. And then that makes me look like narcissistic or, stuck on myself or whatever. Number 3, lack of realistic anxiety. They live so much in the present that they neglect to plan ahead for traffic, parking the car, or dressing for an outing. Interesting. Number 4, they minimize the distress and inconvenience that others must put up with because of their lateness. They think, they're my friends, they'll understand. That sounds familiar. Somebody I know, my ex-husband. What?
Kettle corn closet.
Yes. The person with undeveloped time self-boundaries ends up frustrating not only others, but himself. He ends the day without the sense that a desire realized is sweet to the soul. Instead, he's left with unrealized desires, half-baked projects, and the realization that tomorrow will begin with him running behind schedule. So you got to have careful planning, balance, and all that kind of good stuff. Task completion, that's a big one for people. A lot of people don't complete what they start. Problem with many poor finishers lies in one of these following causes. Resistance to structure. Poor finishers feel that submitting to the discipline of a plan is a put down. Number 2, fear of success. Poor finishers are over-concerned that success will cause others to envy and criticize them. Better to shoot themselves in the foot than to lose their buddies. 3, lack of follow-through. Poor finishers have an aversion to the boring nuts and bolts of turning the crank on a project. They are much more excited about birthing the idea than turning it over to other people to execute it. Interesting.
Good.
What, honey? What? What'd you say? Oh, you can eat it?
It's super soft.
Matthew found a energy bar or something he can actually eat. What is it that you're eating? Let me see.
So whenever bar, freaking tastes amazing.
Oh, he's eating a Wonder bar.
You want a bar?
Sure, I'll taste it.
I haven't found my popcorn yet.
It's all right. No, that's all right. You'll find the popcorn. It's in there.
So these are just for me, right?
Sure. I don't like them.
Good.
Yeah. Distractibility. Poor finishers are unable to focus on a project until it's done. They have often never developed competent concentration skills. I know some people like that. Number 5, inability to delay gratification. Poor finishers are unable to work through the pain of a project to experience the satisfaction of a job well done. They want to go directly to the pleasure. They're like children who want to eat dessert before they eat the well-balanced meal. Number 6, inability to say no to other pressures. Poor finishers are unable to say no to other people and projects. They don't have time to finish any job well. That's cute. Those with task completion problems often feel like 2-year-olds in their favorite toy area. They'll bang a hammer for a bit, vroom with a toy car, talk to a puppet, and then pick up a book, all in 2 minutes or less. It's easy to see the boundary problems inherent to those with task completion problems.
Are you okay with me talking?
Sure. Their internal no hasn't been developed enough to keep them focused on finishing things. Yeah, I understand OCPD. My stepdad had OCPD and OCD. So I totally get it. They are really rough people to be around. Totally get what you're saying there, Wayne. The tongue. In a therapy group, a man held the floor for some time. He'd go off on tangents, change the subject, spend inordinate amounts of time on irrelevant details. Couldn't seem to get to the point. Other members were spacing out, dozing off, or becoming restless. Just as I was about to speak to the man's struggle without getting to the point, or with getting to the point, a woman in the group spoke up and said bluntly, "Bill, talk net, will you? Will ya? Talk net." Oh, talking net, putting a net or boundary on their words can be a struggle for many. How we use language can deeply affect the quality of our relationships. The tongue can be a source of both blessing and curse. I think we've seen that on YouTube. It can be a blessing when we use our tongue to empathize, identify, encourage, confront, and exhort others. It can be a curse when we use it to. It can become a curse when we use it to talk nonstop to hide from intimacy, dominate conversations to control others, gossip, make sarcastic remarks expressing indirect hostility, passive aggressiveness, threaten someone expressing direct hostility, flatter instead of authentically praising, and seducing someone. Yeah, true. Wow. This is interesting. I'm going to read this part. So, I like this. Many people who have difficulty setting verbal boundaries on themselves aren't really aware of their problem. They are often genuinely surprised when a friend says to them, "Sometimes it seems like you interpret my commas as periods."
Can I bother you for a minute?
What?
Just want to give you a hug.
You can give me a hug. Because you've been resenting me most of the day and you're feeling bad about it. It's okay, honey. I forgive you and love you anyway.
Well, I have not resented you yet.
Okay. All right, so I knew a woman who was desperately afraid that others would get to know her. She asked questions and talked quickly so that no one could turn the conversation toward her. She had only one problem. She had to take breaths to continue talking, and the breath created a space for someone else to say something. The woman resolved her problem, however, in an ingenious way. She drew her breaths in the middle of her sentences rather than at the end. That kept people sufficiently off balance, so she was rarely interrupted. An effective strategy with only one problem. She had to keep finding new people to talk to. After a few rounds with her, people disappeared. Oh, I totally understand that. I've gotten these books over the years. This is the Boundaries book. You can get that at your local library or your bookstore. And I knew a lady, actually, when I was a life coach, a client that called me, and oh my gosh, she had what was called pressured speech, where she would just talk the whole time. I don't even know how she breathed. Obviously, she had to breathe at some point, but you couldn't ever hear her breathe because all you heard was her talking. And I couldn't stand it. It was like, oh my gosh, woman, will you let me interject something in between? Did you call me to coach you, or did you call me to talk at me? I can't do it. I cannot even deal with that. The authors are Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Very famous authors, actually. They've written other books as well. They're Christian authors, but nonetheless, whether you're Christian or not, their information is very helpful, I think. All right. So this woman drove everybody nuts and drove them all away because she talked incessantly and never breathed in between, hardly. Or breathed in between, but real quickly, so that nobody could get a word in edgewise. And it says here, the scriptures tell us to treat our words carefully. When words are many, sin is not absent. But he who holds his tongue is wise. Proverbs 10:19. A man of knowledge uses words with restraint. Proverbs 17:27. All right. And in Hebrew, the word for restraint refers to the free action of holding back something or someone. The actor has the power over the object. It's a boundary-laden term. We have the power to set boundaries on what comes out of our mouths. Sadly, a lot of times on YouTube, we don't exercise that power. When we can't hold back or set boundaries on what comes from our lips, our words are in charge, not us. But when we're still responsible, we are still responsible for those words. Our words do not come from somewhere outside of us, as if we're a ventriloquist dummy. They're the product of our hearts. Our saying, "I didn't mean that," is probably better translated, "I didn't want you to know what I thought that about you." We need to take responsibility for our own words. But I tell you that men will have to give account on the day of judgment for every careless word they've spoken. Some people better watch out what they say, it looks like. Matthew 12:36. But that's kind of interesting when you say, "Oh, I didn't mean that." You're really saying, "I didn't want you to know I thought that about you." Wow. Okay. Let's see. Why doesn't my no work? "I'm throwing my no away," Bert told me. "It works fine for setting limits on other people, but every time I try to complete my tasks on time, it breaks down. Where can I trade it in?" Where, indeed, as you read about the out-of-control areas above, you may have felt defeated and frustrated with yourself. You probably could identify with one or more of the problem areas, and you probably are no stranger to the discouragement of not having mature boundaries in these internal areas. What's the problem? Why doesn't our no work on ourselves? Well, we're our own worst enemies, first of all. When we switch our focus from setting limits on other people to setting limits on ourselves, we make a major shift in responsibility. First, we were just responsible to, not for the other party. Now we have a more deal of involvement. We are the other party. We are responsible for ourselves. When you're around a critical person, the kind who finds fault with everything, you can set limits on your exposure to this person's constant criticism. You can change subjects, rooms, houses, or continents. You can leave. But what if this critical person is in your own head? What if you are the person with the problem? What if you have met the enemy and he is you? Wow, good point. We withdraw from relationship when we most need it sometimes. Jessica came to me for treatment for an eating disorder. She was 30 years old and she had been binging since she was a teenager. I asked her about her previous attempts to solve this internal boundary problem. "I try to work out and eat right," she said, "but I always fall back." "Who do you talk to about this?" I asked. "What do you mean?" Jessica looked confused. "Who do you tell about your eating problem when you can't take it anymore?" Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. "You're asking too much. This is a private problem. Can't I do this without anyone knowing?" It's kind of like Adam and Eve hiding from God when they ate the forbidden fruit. That's the next thing they talk about. And as the preacher in Ecclesiastes puts it, "Woe to one who is alone and falls and does not have another to help." True. Now, if you're talking about somebody that's alone because they drive people away, that's on them, not you. So that's a whole different ballgame. Sometimes traumatic memories will surface when somebody finds other people to form attachments with. And sometimes severe conflict will occur with family members. Instead of bringing these painful and frightening feelings and problems to their newfound relationships, these people will often retreat to their rooms to work out the problem. And they'll spend several hours a day doing everything possible back under control. They'll talk positively to themselves. They'll read scriptures compulsively to try to make themselves feel better. It's only when this fails that they finally come out of themselves and they realize that they need to go to God. Such a person needs to feel very secure before she'll risk taking her spiritual and emotional problems to other people. Now, I've had people come and take their problems to me and open up, and I've been able to kind of help them, minister to them, if you will. But then a lot of times after I minister to them and help them, and they stand on their own 2 feet, then all of a sudden they're a little too sure of themselves. They become a little cocky and grandiose, and it's like you create a monster, which is a big reason why I don't do the whole life coaching thing anymore, because I can't deal with that stuff. We're supposed to be joined together. The body can't say like one part to the other, I don't need you. That's how a friendship is supposed to be in relationships. We're supposed to all need each other. We're all different people, but we all should need each other. We're all part of a whole, or at least that's how it's supposed to be. All right. We can't use willpower to solve our boundary problems. We can't just say, "Well, I'm going to do this, and that's how it's going to be, and I'm not going to have any problems with it," and bam, it's just going to happen for us, just that easy. Things like choose to stop, decide to say no, make a commitment to never do it again. Um, Sometimes that works with some people, but that doesn't work with everybody. God told Moses to encourage and strengthen Joshua. He didn't tell Moses to tell Joshua to just say no. He sent him somebody to walk through it with him. And that's what I want my room to be, is a place where people can come and have people walk through things with them. And that's what it's going to be, because I'm not going to tolerate any of the riffraff and the stupid garbage that I've been tolerating a little too much, like I've told you the last time. All right. So you need to learn to set your own boundaries. You need to look at the destruction, the things that you're doing in your life that are sabotaging yourself. You might be having anxiety, depression, phobias, relationship problems, and you might be isolating yourself and having illnesses crop up because you're bottling things inside. You're not going to save people with your problems. Maybe you're expecting things from people they can't give you. Somebody that is a narcissist, for instance, cannot give you empathy. They don't have the wiring for it. Somebody that is BPD is not necessarily a good person to try to befriend, because they're going to flip-flop all over the place. They're going to love you, hate you, punish you, praise you, and it's going to be dizzying. So you need to figure out what are the roots. Figure out what your problem is to begin with the boundaries. Figure out what your contribution to your problem is. How people have hurt you, how you've hurt other people, how you're keeping a cycle going that needs to end. I've had to do that myself several times in several relationships. And if I stop, it'll have to stop, because if I don't respond, there'll be no response back. Matthew's been telling me that for the longest time. It just wasn't sinking in until today, I guess. If you don't respond to an attack and you keep not responding, the attacker eventually has to stop, or just keep futilely firing away at a target that they're not hitting. And that gets boring after a while. Usually they'll go find a new target. But some of them that are just ruthless will keep on going for a long time. And you can just turn a deaf ear to it. You can just shut your phone off, shut your computer down, walk away, find something else to do. There's all kinds of ways of not sabotaging yourself, not letting others sabotage you. All right. Some people don't know how to accept limits and accept consequences and responsibility for their actions. Also, some people don't know how to delay gratification. If you have a problem with overweight, like I do, you need to learn to say no to yourself. You might want that hot fudge sundae, and you might not be able to have it today. Maybe you can tell yourself, well, I can have it, just not right now. Maybe I need to wait a few weeks and see how I'm doing on my plan, and maybe have a small one after that. I've had to do that with myself. There's a lot of times I want to binge eat. Oh my gosh. Just because I like food. Not because I'm hungry. I just love the taste of food. I adore the taste of food. And it has been really hard for me at times, especially when I started this OMAD plan, the 1 meal a day plan. Now it's kind of 1 meal and a little bit extra a day. But still, it's something you have to discipline your mind to saying, this is what I really want, and nothing's going to get in the way of it, and this is how I'm going to go about it. And you need to stick to your own decisions. But don't make unreasonable decisions for yourself that you know you're not going to do. I knew that I had to ease into this whole 1 meal a day plan, so I started with 2 meals a day. Then I went down to 1 meal a day. And now I'm at 1, and like I said, maybe a half a meal a day, maybe 1 1/4. The point is, I usually try to get most of my carbs, if not all of them, in the morning. And then in the evening, I eat maybe fish with some vegetables or some meat with some vegetables. I try to keep the carbs out of it for the evening, because I'm not going to digest those. I'm not going to burn them off. So here are some possible roots of self-boundary conflicts. Lack of training, rewarded destructiveness. So like if you have family members that were dysfunctional, alcoholics maybe, they have learned that out of control behavior forms a relationship. Doesn't mean it's a healthy relationship, but it's a relationship nonetheless. And the family members will come and gather around the dysfunctional person and form like a bond. So that person in that family learned, oh man, when I do something bad, or Uncle Henry was drinking and came home drunk and acting a fool, all the family members were all worried about him and fawning around him and whatever. They formed that thought in their head, wow, this dysfunctional behavior brought people together. So in their own lives, maybe they recreate the dysfunction in relationships because they think that that's a good thing. Some people have distorted needs. They have a desire for something that's unhealthy, and it's an extreme desire. And they only feel good when they're getting that desire met. Some people are afraid of relationships. They want to be loved, but they might overwork or overeat, and they reject people so that the people don't reject them or what they perceive as rejection. And some people talk to be able to feel somewhat connected to a person, but they don't wait for a response because they're afraid of what the response will be. So in essence, even though they're talking, they're pushing the other person away. Some people have unmet hunger emotionally, and they try to find it in relationships and food and other activities and spending money and going shopping and things like that. Some people were raised in very legalistic, so-called Christian homes where they're not allowed to make their own decisions. They're guilted into doing whatever the parent wants them to do or whoever the caretaker is. And they will do extreme things because they're rebellious. They're like, well, you won't let me do this or do that, so I'm going to go and do what I want to do as soon as I can. And those people tend to sabotage themselves too because they end up in addictive behaviors. People that are emotionally distraught and hurt and wounded, they will disguise their pain by using addictions, drinking, overeating, smoking, drugs, whatever. They'll abuse substances so that they don't have to feel unloved, unwanted, and alone. They don't have to feel anything because they numb out to it. If they stop using these disguises, they couldn't handle the isolation that it would bring, that feeling of being unloved, unwanted, rejected, whatever it is they're feeling. When really, if they reach out to the right people, they won't have to go to those vices in their life. All right, so there's boundary conflicts, no matter what it is, whether it's an addiction. Okay, Wayne, have a good night or day or whatever it is. No matter what it is, just ask God to help you see what it is that you're doing to sabotage yourself. You need to take responsibility for the behavior that's out of control. You need to have safe, trusting relationships with other people so that you can get control over yourself in a healthy way and not using vices and disguises and crutches to do it with that are unhealthy. If you're a do-it-yourselfer type person, you don't need other people. You sometimes need to lower down your little guard that you have up and trust at least one other person to get to know them. You might find a real friend in doing that. You might be hurt. Who knows? They might turn on you and rend you to pieces because some people do that. But you're never going to know until you let down your guard and risk just a little bit. Calculated risk, but risk nonetheless. You need to have rootedness with people, and that takes time. It takes a long time. The hard thing is when you get rooted with someone, you really like that person, and then that person has some kind of issues that take them in another direction, or they're just not able to give to you what they were giving to you. That's when you have to go and find a new person. Obviously, go to God first and ask him who he wants to connect you with. And then, maybe join a support group or find a significant other that you can connect to and Begin the healing process. Let's see. They tell the story about the evil spirit going out of the man. And since the man didn't replace that emptiness with anything else, that spirit comes back and brings more spirits with it. So if you're going to get free from something, it's not enough to just break the addiction. You have to have something to go to. And I've been saying this for years because those of you, whether you know it or not, my counseling, or not my counseling, but my degree in psychology, my master's degree was actually in substance abuse counseling, addictions counseling. And what I've always taught people and shared with people who had addictions were, I don't expect you to just put down the bottle of alcohol or just drop the cigarettes or the vape or whatever. What I expect you to do, if you really want to get free from this, is find out another healthy outlet you can go to. Because if you just put down the cigarettes, you might start eating. You might start doing, explicit activities you shouldn't do. You're going to find another vice to go to because you're trying to fill a void. So you have to have something to go to. You can't just put something down and have nothing, because you can't. Your brain does not work that way. Your brain is geared with neurotransmitters, which are little grooves in between the cells of your brain that form messages. When you have an addiction, you have formed that as a message in those brain cells, those little grooves. You're telling your brain, say you smoke a cigarette, you're telling your brain, I need this. This relaxes me. This is nice. This is my time. This is my time to regroup and to think about my life in a pleasant way while I'm just breathing out, exhaling, whatever. And you can do that exhaling thing without smoke coming out your mouth, by the way. But anyway, if that's what you do, you're telling your brain, this is our time. You're cementing a memory. Matthew calls it muscle memory. It's the same with smoking. You form a muscle memory, you form a cell memory, whatever. And before you know it, that memory becomes a habit. The habit becomes a ritual. The ritual becomes an addiction. And then it's so hardwired into you, it's hard to break it. So how do you break it? Well, in my opinion, from what I've seen with people, it takes 21 days at least to make or break a habit. So what you need to do is find a healthier habit that you're going to take up. So like maybe you like doing puzzles. Maybe you like to go bowling, whatever. So every time you're going to go and do that one habit, you're going to start gradually, just for a moment in time, doing that new habit. You're going to retrain that brain to realize, I don't need this to make myself feel good, to fill this emptiness, this void, to have time be mine. I can go bowling to do that. I can hang out with friends to do that. I can work on puzzles to do that. But it's a very, very slow process. And with smoking, it's a physiological addiction as much as it is a physical addiction, psychological addiction, emotional addiction, and all of that stuff. So you want to go through therapy too. Don't just try it on your own. Go to a therapist that deals with that kind of stuff and, learn how to do it. But the point is, you cannot break a habit, in my opinion and my experience, without forming a new habit to replace it. All right. So if you had a friendship with somebody and the friendship ends, or a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship and it ends, you need to find a new significant other. I'm not saying a boyfriend necessarily, but a friend. Somebody else you can pour your heart out to as a confidant. Don't just try to say, oh, well, I'm just going to end this here and move on. You're going to have time to grieve, to feel the pain, to embrace it, to realize that there's a loss there. Which, by the way, that's this book. Where the heck did it go? Hold on. What did I do with my book? All right. I don't know what happened to my book, but there was another book. Maybe it's on the shelf. 30 Days to Heal a Broken Heart, I think is what it's called. Yeah, so that's the next. Oh, here it is. Sorry. How to Heal a Broken Heart in 30 Days. Get this book. Get your hands on this one. And go through the 30-day process as you're healing from the breakup of that relationship. It's a day-by-day guide to saying goodbye and getting on with your life. It's a really good book. I've used it successfully in my own life when relationships broke up. I'm about to use it again. I'm also going to find my red book, How to Break Your Addiction to a Person, because I am going to be reading from that book as soon as I can find it. So you need to do that. You need to embrace the pain, feel the pain, and gradually let go or hold on loosely and start replacing those neurotransmitter messages with new neurotransmitter messages. Okay. Address your real need. Allow yourself to fail. Tell yourself no when it wants to go back into those, faulty things that were causing you the pain. Listen to people that are empathic as they try to comfort you. Don't push everybody away. Accept the comfort of other people. Welcome the consequences. Surround yourself with people that are supportive. This room is a great room to find support most of the time, unless there's a bunch of riffraff and people dragging the past in here, which is why I'm starting to delete people when they come in and start baloney. All right. People with self-boundary issues, or friends of people with self-boundary issues, have problems in how they relate to these people. They'll try to become parental. I told you so, or now what did you learn from your experience? Consider this a lesson, that kind of stuff. You need to restore people gently because it's kind. When somebody's hurting, even if they're sabotaging themselves, you need to restore them gently. And sometimes they become rescuers and try to come along and save them from their suffering. And, oh, don't cry. I hate it when people say don't cry to people. It's probably one of the most irritating things I ever hear somebody saying. Don't cry. No, cry. If you feel like crying, cry. It's not a crime. You can say they're there. That doesn't mean you're telling them not to cry. But don't tell people not to cry. Let them let it out. It's a good, healthy, outlet. All right. If you've been victimized, person who has, in a helpless state, been injured by the exploitation of another. Some victimization is verbal, some is physical, some is intimate, some is satanically ritualistic. All cause extreme damage to the character and structure of that person. And as an adult, they have spiritual, emotional, cognitive distortions. There are 3 things that are common in every time this is the case where a person's victimized. They feel helpless, they feel injured, and they feel violated or exploited. And some of the results of this are depression, compulsive disorders, impulsive disorders, isolation, inability to trust others, inability to form close attachments, inability to set limits, poor judgment in relationships, further exploitation in relationships. So they attach to exploiters and abusive people. A deep sense of pervasive badness, shame, guilt, chaotic lifestyle, sense of meaninglessness and purposelessness, unexplainable terror and panic attacks, phobias, rage attacks, suicidal feelings, and thoughts. Whew, that's quite the exhaustive list. Yes, you need something. What? What? Why are you standing there staring at me, not answering me? What? I can't understand you. I don't understand you. Anyways.
I'm just admiring my wife, honey.
Okay. The list describes you, G. Marie. It describes a lot of people. I've been victimized and violated and exploited.
Will you get that out for me?
Many times in my life. Recently and in the past by several people. Yes, honey, I'll get it out when it's done. I have to get Matthew's popcorn out when it pops. Okay. Okay. Our ability to trust ourselves is based on our experience of other people being trustworthy. So it's hard to even trust your own self if other people have mistreated you. You lose a sense of trust because the person that hurt you was usually somebody you knew or somebody that you became acquainted with, and that trust was broken. It also destroys a sense of ownership over your soul. So you feel like an empty shell because somebody took something that was so uniquely and personally yours when you're abused. The person feels that they're like public property and their resources, their body and time should be available to others just for the asking. That's why when somebody comes along and tells you, do this, do that, get up there and go live, whether you want to or not. Get up there and dance, whether you feel comfortable dancing or not. Go out there and show them what I taught you. Narcissistic parents do this a lot to their kids. They want them to become like trained performing SEALs or something. And that's just wrong on so many levels. Because people have been victimized, they have a very loose sense of boundaries. So they feel like, I don't have a right to my own body. I don't have a right to my own thoughts and my own words and things like that because that was taken from me by this person. So nobody stopped it. So obviously, I shouldn't feel like I have a right to say this or do this. Which is why Matthew and I get complaints all the time because I was rendered voiceless for years. And now I have a voice. And now I can come on YouTube and use my voice. And I don't like it when people try to shut off my voice. But people obviously continue to do that on YouTube. So I just go with it and move in a different direction because there's no stopping it because abusers get away with abuse in this world. Life is not fair. If life were fair, it would be a lot more balanced and a lot more peaceful and people would all get along. But life is not fair. The people that hurt people go scot-free too much of the time. It's a fact and it's the truth. Okay. And a lot of times the victims are the ones that have to walk away with the broken pieces of their lives and figure out how to stand again while the abusers are laughing and scorning and having a party. That's how it works sometimes, unfortunately. Not everybody that abuses suffers consequences that they deserve to suffer. What are you going to do? You're going to not worry about that. You're going to pick up the pieces of your own life and you're going to find healthy other people to hang out with and be with. All right, boundary work. Very helpful in moving people towards restoration and healing. Suggest that if you have been abused in any way, shape, or form, that you're seeing a therapist. I'm seeing a therapist, and honestly, it helps a lot talking to somebody about what's being done to you when you're being abused. It really does. Because they can take an unbiased viewpoint and give you, some direction. Like my counselor, does for me. I got some good notes in here. I might want to read the rest of this another time and then bring it to the next live stream. I know, G. Marie, we have some good ones here, but we're too far away from you. It took us going through a lot of them to find Matthew a good EMDR counselor. We've been weeding out a lot of them, believe me. Yeah, I think I need to read this chapter on my own again and actually apply it. I think I'll do that soon. Anyway, y'all, let's just chat now if you want to. Not many people in here, but we can still talk. Even if I just talk to G because nobody else wants to talk. Yeah, you do have to have somewhat of a good chemistry, especially, dealing with the type of issues you have. People are real hesitant and they're very stigmatizing of people that have those issues. So it is hard to find people that want to deal with that kind of thing. I don't know if I would be a good counselor for that. Oh, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitize. Desensitization, reprocessing. Eye movement desensitization reprocessing. The idea of EMDR is it either uses a light, this finger going back and forth or fingers going back and forth, or sounds and vibrations moving back and forth from the left to the right and back and forth, back and forth. The reason for the eye movement in that word is because what it does is it imitates when you're sleeping and your eye movement goes back and forth. A lot of people don't know that. But when you sleep, you have rapid eye movement. Your eyes scan back and forth in your head like this at different paces, different times and stuff like that. When that's happening, your mind, I believe, is dreaming during the eye movement time. And doing it during the day is imitating that eye movement. It's helping you. What they do is they ask you questions about things that you've experienced, memories that you have, how you feel about things, while these lights are going back and forth, or the sounds in the earphones are going back and forth, and the vibrations are going back and forth. That's good, Hillary. I know it's really good for that. And yesterday, when I went with Matthew to his appointment, I actually got to put the earphones on and feel the vibrating things that he holds in his hand. And I get it now. It makes sense. Excuse me. Because they're talking to you. The therapist is talking to you while this is going on. So you're not consciously aware that there's do-do, 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 do-do in your ears and the vibrations in your hands, but you're subconsciously aware of it.
Except for me, it's the opposite.
You're consciously aware of it? Oh, Matthew's very aware of it, apparently.
Less aware of what she's asking me and what I'm telling her.
So you're less defensive. So it lowers Matthew's inhibition so he can open up easier. So it's different for him, maybe because of the autism. I'm not sure. Because the brain works differently, maybe, in people with autism. But I guess it can go either way. Regardless, it helps the person re-experience the trauma, the memory, or whatever, but it works through it without the sting that it normally has. It doesn't hurt so deeply and bad. It's not so terrifying. Like Hillary just said, she was able to experience a bad image in her head without freaking out. So it's a good thing to look into if you have these kind of problems. EMDR is definitely helpful. Another thing that I heard about, it's like tapping. You tap different points on your face and stuff. And they claim that this helps too. It has something to do with the meridians in your face or whatever. I don't really know. He hasn't done that, but I've heard of that's EFT. Emotional something. Emotional. I don't remember what it's called. I'll have to look it up. But that also works really well for some people. Oh, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, tapping. EFT, not EMT. My bad. EFT. Tapping points. It accesses the body's energy and it sends signals to the brain that controls stress through the meridians in your body, and it will restore balance in your body. Now, years ago, you wouldn't even hear me talking about this stuff because it was new agey, and I was like, I don't want to know about it. I don't want to hear about it. No chiropractor, none of that. That's all new age. I don't want anything to do with it. But I do happen to know that we are made of energy, and controlling that energy and balancing that energy is important. I think there's something to it. Feng Shui is another thing. People don't believe that Feng Shui really makes a difference, like where you put furniture in a room. But I can prove to you that it does just by watching people's reactions when you move stuff around in a room. I don't think it's like this deeply spiritual type thing that's like, woo. I think it's something where there's energy, and balancing energy makes a difference in people's lives, in their brains, in their body, in a room, whatever. But I don't think you need to get into the like hocus pocus voodoo stuff to balance energy or balance spirit. It's a whole different ball game to me. It's not any of that weird witchcrafty whatever stuff. But I do believe in energy. I mean, it makes sense that we're energy. We have static electricity in our hair. You take a balloon and rub it on your head, it'll stick to the wall. You have energy coming out of your body. It's static. It's a form of energy. Everything in our body and our minds works on an energy force. Spirit is energy. God breathed breath into us when we were born. When the baby comes out and they cry, that's the first breath that baby takes. That's energy. They're inhaling the energy in the atmosphere. So anyway, that's what I believe. Excuse me. Oh. So does anybody have anything else you want to say? There's not many of us in here because there's no drama and people love drama. If you can't start drama, then nobody's going to want to be around. Yeah, scents help, but I'm highly allergic to most scents, unfortunately. I burned some vanilla incense the other day in our house, and I had a hard time with it. Matthew had a hard time with it. It was just, I don't know, maybe too strong of a scent, maybe the wrong kind of incense. I'm not sure. But some scents I can handle and some I can't. I don't do well with most scentsies, like the floral type of scentsies. Some of it I just really cannot handle the smell of. I can't handle a lot of wax melts either. Some of them I can. I can handle them for a little while, but then it starts like making my nose feel all funny. It makes me feel like I have the flu. So I think it depends on what the wax is made of as well. I just buy the cheap stuff from Walmart, and probably not the best place to get it. Anyway, Julie, tell me about yourself. I've never met you in here, I don't think. What's going on? What's new? What brought you to the room? How'd you find me? I always wonder how people find my room. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have some amber oils that I use. My daughter's name is Amber too, so I think there's like scents and candles and stuff made with her name. Oh, okay, Julie. Sorry. I'm glad you've been with me a long while. Sorry I didn't realize. I've been dealing with a lot of crazy stuff lately. Which, if you've been with me a while, you know what I mean. No need to elaborate. Ooh. Billie Eilish broke down on stage. Yikes, I wonder what happened. I have to watch this later.
What?
I said I'm going to have to watch that later.
What?
Billie Eilish. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're still here. And thanks for coming in tonight. You hate incense, G. Marie, huh? Is it triggering to you, incense? Yeah, Matthew is working, actually. He is working, and he's doing very, very well. Yeah, Mommy Mars, I haven't seen a lot of her latest songs. Glade Max Wax Melts. I don't know if I have Glade. I don't think that's the one I have. I'm not sure. Yes, prayers do work. Yes, they do. I know. Somebody mentioned the other day to me about how we've come such a long way. It was not all that long ago that I was standing in the doorway wailing as I was watching water encroach upon my home and flood my house, and just feeling like my life was ending as I knew it. And now I'm working, Matthew's working. We're living between two buildings now, but it's not that bad. I mean, yeah, I wish I had a nicer surrounding and a nice house like people do with carpeting and nice furniture, and but I don't. That's not where I'm at right now in my life, and I just am thankful for what I have. Maybe someday somebody will step in and I'll have nice stuff again. I don't think this will be the rest of my life that I have to live in this situation, but it's just where I am now. And then once I'm in a better situation, I can pay it forward to somebody else and help them. So definitely teaching me Thanksgiving and appreciation for what I have. So I'm learning my boundaries myself. Like, I'm learning that if I'm going to work long hours, first of all, I'm going to have to get enough sleep the night before. Second of all, Matthew and I are going to work on trying to figure out which hours work best for me to be doing the tutoring so that I don't burn out all the time, and how many hours I'm going to have to work in order to pay the bills, and so that maybe he can have some more free time, not having to work so hard too. See, normally he wouldn't even be getting home yet. He'd just be getting out of work probably by now. Anyway, does anybody else want to talk about anything else or whatever? If not, I'll close down and probably work on this tutoring schedule with my husband. What reminds you of weeds?
I'm trying to help you for 15 minutes.
You can't help me for 15 minutes?
I'm walking and moving.
Okay. Oh, incense reminds you of weed, like marijuana. I get what you're saying. Yeah, I can see that. Well, somebody threw it out, I think, at my neighbor's, and I just picked it up and said, I'll try it, because I used to like burning incense years ago. But yeah, it didn't work very well for me. Anyway. So, you guys, I'm going to get going. I don't really have anything else to share right now. I know they are expensive, Jemer, you're right. But I appreciate everybody coming in. You have a good night. Yes, cinnamon and water. Yes, that's a very good idea. Thanks for the idea, Julie. You guys have a great night, and I'll see you on the next live. God bless.